Another thing here to point out is this new road that's just been built in here. This is new road. We did come in the beginning on some reconstructed road, but you can see here we've got about 6 inches or so of this 4-inch material. It's called jaw run, and it's pretty much what comes out of just a basic jaw, which the jaw is a grinder that grinds up the rock. Below this we've got native material here, but it's subgrade. This is what we call subgrade. You can see it's very sandy, loamy, gravelly and cobbly. It doesn't have a lot of clay in it, but we still need it to be packed down before we put on the surfacing here, which is not your typical surfacing like I've discussed in prior road stops. It is a 4-inch because we're not keeping this road. We're going to abandon it because we have to cross a couple streams, and we want to pull those culverts out once we're done harvesting back in here. And there were some wet areas in this area here, which you can kind of start to put together. You can see here the soil's damp even though it's been in the sunshine all day long. I can see some alder over there, and I can see some devil's club over there, and healthy cedar trees which like water as well. And you can see now here in the soil we've got dampness even though it's been exposed for days in the sun, and so that's a sign of a wet area there. Nice healthy stack of second growth trees, all varying in age, but probably around 80 to 90 years old, the larger trees. And then the smaller trees were probably 60 to 70 years old, that were more of the shade tolerant hemlock and things like that came in. And so in this wet spot here, what we've done too is put in bigger pieces of what's called pit shot. And this is basically, once they shoot the pit, this is the size of the material that they end up putting into the jaw, which creates then this type of material on our road surface here now that we're going to use. And again, we didn't put down much surfacing except for here on the end of the landing, because this road is going to be temporary. But here at the end of the landing, or the end of the road, we're going to have quite a bit of activity. And having this surfacing, the fines from the surfacing here on top of the jaw run is going to help with the armoring of this road so it doesn't fall apart as much. And because this is going to have a lot of activity on it. As you can see, we've got a lot of very large trees in here. More devil's club over there. I see blue ribbon there, which indicates a stream. Again, here you can see moisture still in the ditch here, even though it's been exposed to the sun for days. So this is a wet area back here too. So not only is it going to get excuse me, a lot of activity, it's a little damp back here, and so we want to armor that a little bit extra with not only a good compacted subsurface, but also with this ballast, which is our shot rock, which is about 1 foot plus material. And then we've got our 4-inch plus material on top of that, and then a little bit of the 1.5 inch, which is our surfacing size material. And we're gonna go check out the BB pit, which is where this material came from, in a little bit here in one of these stops, and take a look at it. It was just shot, and so we're gonna see some really recent rock face exposure. And you might also notice this rock has kind of a brownish hue to it, or color, and that has to do with, you know, basically the type of weathered basalt It is. And if you remember from the Sweet Tea Borrow Pit, we had very similar brownish type of rock. This is a little bit better as far as the strength of the basalt and the weathering of the basalt. We're also higher up, but we're in the same general vicinity of the Raging and you know, Tiger Mountain pass here at about 1,300 feet. And so we're finding the same type of volcanic material from that era. Okay, so we just hopped into this second growth stand from the end of that spur road from the timber sale known as Basalta Much, the harvest activity we're about to do. We are now in a second growth forest, and what I'm going to try and do here is point out some of the reasons why. You can see the birds, the woodpecker's really loving that tree there, and it's gone. It's a nice snag. There's one right next to it here. You know, these are just starting to go from competition, decadence, and age, basically. There are a handful of these in here. This is also kind of we're getting close to a stream as well, so there might be some water influencing kind of the passing of these trees here. Competition for water, could be maybe even disease, some kind of heart rot or something that was brought on by fungus, you know, living in the area where it's wet. Douglas fir does not like really wet soils. I can tell we're starting to get into a wet spot because I've got Devil's Club right there. A nice carpet of Western Lily of the Valley. More Devil's Club over there. But what I'd like to point out are the stumps. We see there are some smaller stumps, but mostly large old growth stumps. Some of these smaller stumps, I will say, may have been from a pole harvest, but there are very few of them and they're far between. You see a lot of these large stumps here. There's one back there. There's one behind there. A couple smaller stumps there, maybe from a pole harvest. And then oh, stump hole there. Another huge old growth stump back there. Not a ton of old growth stumps in here, but not a ton of stumps in general either. And so behind that old growth stump is a huge old growth stump. And so, you know, as I'm walking through the woods, stepping into mountain beaver holes, you know, on my daily recon through forests like this, you know, these are the things I look for. And I see a lot of old growth stumps. I see some of these rotten stumps here that look like the tree is blown over. You can see here's the bowl of the tree, probably from some kind of rot, which these trees are probably experiencing some kind of heart rot, which ends up just happening over time, but also associated with Devil's Club, kind of a wet area in here again, which could be bringing on some of the fungus that that is not very good for trees. Heart rot and root rot probably kill more trees than than humans do, even maybe in a natural forest setting. And so beautiful stand here though of second growth. We only are really seeing excuse me, like I said, one class, if you will, of stump. That original forest, the primeval forest, if you will, we're seeing those stumps, the big old growth stumps. We're not seeing hardly any intermediate stumps. The ones we are seeing that are slightly smaller or smaller stumps could have been from a pole harvest. I don't know that for sure. I would have to go back into the records and check that to see if that were the case. But here we are. Here's a good example of root rot, and basically why this tree probably blew over, because the bottom of it here, or butt rot is another term for it, is rotted out. So this is the basaltamuch sale, and we're gonna move on to more of this sale and the rock pit that we used to create the roads for this sale, and enjoy this gorgeous day, just beautiful day here in up on Tiger Mountain. And here again, few and far between, but nevertheless there's an old growth stump, which again tells me this is probably second growth.